Hello and welcome to the Stafford Connect podcast. I'm Tom Cohen. On this episode, we'll return to an issue we explored in episode 7 last year, data centers. Our guest on that episode was Kerry Roberts, and our purpose was to explore some of the technical issues involved in data centers. We also took a look at the more common public concerns in data center construction. If you weren't able to join us then, you might want to go and visit our YouTube page and take a look at the episode because it relates to today's topic. For those who missed it, recently the Stafford Board of Supervisors approved a new set of rules on the construction of data centers. The board's reappraisal of existing standards was due in no small part to the work of our guest, Erin Sanzero, and her organization, Protect Stafford. Erin and her group have for some time been concerned about the effects of data centers on nearby residents and on the environment. They've highlighted some concerns about water and power use and potential noise pollution. That being said, I'd like to invite Erin to the program to tell us more. Welcome, Erin. We're glad to have you here.
I'm thrilled to be here.
So first, just usually what we do is have people tell us a little bit about themselves and their background so people get to know you, because you have been out and about doing a lot of great things in the community to make things people know about stuff, but I don't know everybody knows about you.
Me personally?
Yeah.
So I've been in Virginia for a very long time now, I think, or a large part of my life. Like many geriatric millennials, I've got a lot of experience in both for-profit and nonprofit spaces. I'm an equestrian. I grew up riding Western, but when I moved to the East Coast, it was all hunter-jumper territory and riding English, and I have the pleasure of doing that in my adulthood now, and I'm a second-generation beekeeper.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's pretty neat. And bees are so great.
Mm-hmm.
And horses are. I rode horses when I was younger.
Oh, cool.
So it's awesome. So tell us a little bit about the organization that you're in charge of right now is Protect Stafford, and that you sort of helped grow. And so tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll get into the nuances.
Yeah, of course. So Protect Stafford is a 501c4, and as a nonprofit, I'm its president, and we are simply a bipartisan grassroots coalition of residents who are advocating for responsible data center development here in Stafford County.
And what sort of got you interested or got this all blooming and going? Because it's got, the history of data centers in the county is X, but you all coming along to try to educate people is a different offshoot from what the county was doing.
Yeah, I think broadly speaking, the currents and pressures of data center development are what's really driven this. Of course, this was not something that myself or other Stafford residents were unaware of, but that it was something that was in northern Virginia, right? One of the fun things about living in Stafford is that people from northern Virginia think we live, they don't know where, we're so far south, and people from Richmond think we are northern Virginia. So this wasn't hot on the radar, but ultimately, as the county received at least 3 times more applications than it anticipated, and the majority of those were not in locations where they expected them to be sited. I'm just one of many residents who became aware of that and said, oh my goodness, we've got to get on this issue and be talking about it and understanding and advocating that we just don't have unmitigated data center development run us all over.
And your group has pretty wide support across the county.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you all develop that aspect? Because with this being a commuter community, often it's very difficult to get a lot of public engagement in things. And so you all have been very good and successful, I think, at getting a wide swath of public involved.
No, thanks for that compliment. I think, I think whether it was on purpose or not, I think that developers might have lit a match and started a wildfire. And so the gift of one Stafford is that we all go to the same Board of Supervisor meetings and we all go to the same Planning Commission meetings. And when you look at this issue and you start studying it and seeing where all the applications are coming, it's pretty easy to see that this is a county-wide situation. And so if you want to work for change, you're going to need to work across districts and get into conversations, not just with your immediate neighbors, but your North Stafford neighbors if you're South Stafford or vice versa. And so quite frankly, it was quite organic to just get into conversation and say, well, what can we do to make sure that residents are at the table as these decisions are being made?
And it seemed as though with the proliferation of applications, at different parts of the county that sort of helped spur people on who really didn't know what was going on, and then all of a sudden it's being discussed in the area. As you said, initially the mentality was it's a Northern Virginia thing, but then it just sort of organically blossomed.
Yeah, I think that's it exactly. I mean, the reality is that this year alone, we've had the public become aware of the broad majority of these applications that are in the pipeline. So you have residents in North Stafford and in South Stafford and obviously Eastern Stafford growing, burgeoning awareness of all of this. And then as they show up to meetings, as they come online, it's easy to get into conversation. And it's been helpful to be moving through the standards conversation because that was something we could all agree on, that what we wanted across the county was some reasonable and safe, more enforceable rules so that if we do this, we're doing it from a position where residents are really thought about anticipatorily.
Great. And is there a specific goal for the project Protect Stafford?
Really, our sole goal is responsible data center development in our county. Of course, there's offshoots of that. What does that mean? Well, that means educating the public. It means educating the board and the planning commissioners because this is an emergent industry. And certainly to be doing it hyperscale like we are, to be doing it right on top of residential neighborhoods. Obviously, our watersheds in the eastern part of the county are some really critical spaces to be very attentive to. So there's a lot that's novel here and making sure that there's awareness, education, good conversation so that we navigate that space between progress and preservation thoughtfully. And so that's what we were hoping to do.
And so how have you dealt with trying to get, we'll say first, information about data centers and development that way? Because that's sort of on one level, it could be drinking out of the fire hose, but on another level, it's all brand new. What has that been a challenge for your whole group to try to get through the information at large, and then we'll deal with Stafford?
Yeah, of course. I mean, yes and no. You're not wrong that it is. I liken this whole thing to a hydra. It's complex. There's a lot of layers, so there is a lot to sift through. And of course, it's not only the data center industry itself, but there's also learning local governance, learning what it means to be Dillon versus home rule. All of those things are there for residents to learn. But I think what a great kind of boots on the ground, on the job training opportunity for residents to really get involved in civics, whether they did or didn't do, youth in government or student council when they were growing up. It's a great way. So a lot of people have a lot in their life experience tool bag to work with. Obviously, Stafford County has some really fantastic residents who are highly and well educated. So from doing research and knowing how to do research well, that has not been a problem. And this is a conversation that's growing nationally and even globally. And with Virginia being the epicenter of it, there's really a wealth of both experiential stuff to lean on and a lot of burgeoning research. I really think one of our joys is that we're maybe in what I would call the second wave of this in Northern Virginia, where we now have communities that are living next to existing data centers, and we're not just living in a hypothetical. We can talk about some of the impacts and hopefully, and this has been our goal, how can we look to our northern neighbors, learn from their mistakes, and do this better going forward, not simply follow in their path naively.
Right. And I've noticed, and you brought it up, that with the population having come from all parts of the country, the learning the way that Virginia has things done
Mhm.
is sort of reshifting a lot of the mindset of a lot of people. If you're from certain states where they have home rule, they can just decide to do stuff. And we'll shift. I'll give you an example about housing.
Yeah.
But in certain states, they can say no more houses until the road system is made up or the water system can handle it or schools are built. But we don't have that in Virginia. So part of that, as you were saying, is educating the population about what is the process.
Yeah, what's even possible. Like I know people would love, I've heard this a lot, where people just would like the county to put a moratorium on any applications. And they don't understand, well, that's in theory maybe a nice idea, but the county doesn't have that authority to do that. So a lot of it is, like all things in life, it's highly situational and contextual. You have to understand where there are boundaries that are fluid or up for negotiation, and where it's a nice idea in theory, but it's not possible. And then you've got to play the ball where it lands, I like to say.
And you're working really hard on educating, and you're educating on two folds. One is the data center information, how they operate, this, that, and the other is this is how Virginia operates, and this is what we can do and can't do. And so that's sometimes I'm being at some of your meetings, it's like juggling 800 things at the same time, because people ask the same question. There'll be like 5 things that you have to sort of piece out and give, this is this fact. And
it's always that gift of what's the right amount of information at that time. I mean, it's the gift of teaching, right? And thinking about what's helpful. But you're right. It's what's going on at the local level. It's the data center industry. It's naming the way this industry is iterating into the future. It's, of course, thinking about what's happening at General Assembly. And so we'll see, obviously, in this coming year, that's going to be a really interesting additional piece of the puzzle. And it won't necessarily impact the applications that are in the pipeline right now that are upon us, but more broadly, that's going to matter, I think.
right. So we can jump it off into all sorts of areas. So one of the areas that, and you can say which one I'll throw a bunch. You can say which one you want to grab.
Toss me some balls.
But there's obviously the ideas of setbacks of how far from property lines, roads, etc. There's the water issue. There's the energy issue and where we get the energy, and that's a lot. I love it. It's like, oh, that's a state issue, but then but we have to do stuff too. And then you have the ever wonderful world of proffers, which has been mitigated. So I'll let you jump into whichever one you want to start jumping in, and then we can go from there.
So here's the thread I'll pull, because I think that proffers and the setbacks, buffers, and standards they're related, or certainly they're in conversation. So what I hope the public understands, first and foremost, is that I think our general position is that distance is safety and safety is distance, right? And so we can go around the horn and go into the heart of the issue and come back out. But I think at a high level, we know, especially when we're talking about incompatible use cases being right next to each other, distance is safety, right? It's what we teach our children when they're learning to drive. When you rear-ended the car in front of you, we know why, right? Or what would have probably helped. And then so where proffers come into that is that, well, first of all, forgive me, in our ordinance, there is a provision that the board can choose to modify the setbacks and the buffers so long as they deem it reasonable. So there's a lot of opportunity for the board, no matter what the setback or buffer is, to modify that number. And then where that intersects with proffers, of course, is proffers are a promise, or maybe a fun way to help people remember it. It's a promised offer, right? It's a voluntary thing that you can tell me if you find quid pro quo to be an unfair way to understand it. At its best level, it is an offer that is a win-win for everyone. But certainly some may argue that there are proffers that can go really sideways where it's not a win-win. And so in the end, via proffers or the board's decision or a magical combination of the two, those setbacks and buffers can be changed on a dime. So with the current standards as they are, as they've been recently ordained, our hope was to set a higher bar so that the county and the board could operate from a position of strength, and they could choose to lower those where it seemed reasonable and appropriate. I don't know that we'll always agree on where that lands, but that we started from a better negotiating ground where we had something that was tenable, because what we had on the books was not tenable.
And one of the things and some of the people who are faithful listeners and watchers of us understand is that, I mean, the proffer business goes through everything.
Right.
And that the state has put limits on what we as a community can ask. I mean, for decades, it was an interesting situation where members of the Board of Supervisors could say, I want X, and I'm not going to approve your project if you don't do X.
Right.
And then so then the developers complained to the state passed a law, Governor McAuliffe signed it, which limited a lot of what we could ask for.
Right.
And so, for example, the the way the state law works is that if a development is not impacting schools, we get no money for schools.
Right.
So the data center is not necessarily impacting a school system. So therefore, we can't get, we can't say they're going to build a high school or something.
Right.
And after I got off the board and we were I was hearing about the explosion of all these new applications. I asked somebody in staff, I was like, so we need a fire rescue center, training center. Can we get that? And they're like, no, that's not covered in the proffers.
Right.
So if they want to offer it, we can say thank you, thank you, thank you. But we can't. The county, are really limited what we can ask for.
Yeah.
And you're right. So that if the proffer is 500 feet or 1,000 feet or whatever,
Yeah.
for anything, homes, businesses, whatever, they could come in and say they want to go 200 feet. And if they either make a case for it or the county's more amenable to it, instead of it being the 500 or whatever, it's now 200. And so that's what, for the people who aren't familiar, that's sort of what you're talking about is if your idea was set the level here, and then if the county ends up going here, at least they start at a higher level than
and
they start at a lower one.
Yeah, and this higher level that we're talking about for setbacks and buffers is really specifically when we're talking about it being next to residential. So we haven't made them stricter or stronger when it's in places that it makes sense. It's more obvious, like an industrial commercial space. We wanted to see the standards beefed up when we were willing to entertain standards that would say, okay, well, we are going to put this next to somebody's house. And there's nobody that would agree that 100 feet from someone's property line, where the developer can clear cut all the way to the property line, shove dirt for a 50-foot berm, and replant some trees on it, makes sense that 100 feet from your property line is a 105-foot tall data center building, the size of a city block.
Right. So, and that's sort of the one of the quandaries about all this is, and a lot of other communities have gone different ways on their buffers.
Yeah, and there's a lot of I don't believe that these standards are perfect, and I think that fundamentally misunderstands public policy. It's never about, we don't want to let good be the enemy of perfect, and we understand that as this industry develops, we're going to bring this back and continue to learn and modify, and policies evolve. That's why legislatures exist. But we knew that what we had absolutely did not protect residents, and so we needed to do that. And I should say, because I've focused on residents with the setbacks, but for us it was really important. It's not just about that. It is also about our critical wetlands and our riparian spaces, and it's about proximities to schools. That's, sensitive facilities weren't considered either. We would still like to see that improved in terms of the distinctions between residents and something like a nursing home or a school. But again, when you're lobbying and you're doing work to get something better, good legislation across the line, you have to play the ball where it lands and advance the best you can. So these can be improved, and I hope that in the future we will improve them, but they are a demonstrable improvement from where we were.
And so then if we're done with the proffer discussion, then we can move to the water discussion, because and thanks to the work of the Planning Commission bringing it up, I believe, in their study, and they spent a long time with loads of meetings and public that were open to the public about it. But if a project is approved in Stafford, Stafford has to supply the water, unless there's something that says something different. And so that demonstratively changed, because I think a lot, even those of us who were on the Planning Commission, had it in the back of our head, but because of all the other issues, we didn't really put that two and two together until there was actually the Planning Commission started doing its work and sort of raised that.
Yeah, well, and I think just to kind of take a step back and not presume that every listener is as data center, excited
Dorky.
or dorky. Yeah, data center. That's how I should have introduced myself. I'm a data center dork. But for those of you who are not aware, coming online, data centers use an enormous amount of water and energy. That is how they power and then cool all of the servers. So if you think about your laptop and the way that a fan might come on your laptop to help cool it, a data center is doing that on like a cosmic scale. And so water is how we cool it, how they cool it. And so, like you're saying, a big piece of that is, well, then where are they going to get the water from? Who's supplying them? So we're going to see intersections with water conversations. And that's also how we're seeing how this is related to the Kraken Loop that has a meeting actually tonight, which is that 70-mile KV line that's going to come up through Stafford County, going up into Fauquier, because that's part of how the energy is going to get supplied. And so it is a complicated topic, no question, but figuring out how and where and the cumulative effects. You talked about how it's a state level decision, not a local level. And that's an unfortunate reality here where I think the best thing is to compare it to the ethical quandary of the tragedy of the commons, right? Which is where individuals all deplete a shared resource, but they deplete it so much so that the cost of that is shared by everyone, and the resource is either depleted beyond reason or wiped out. And so part of the challenge is that at the local level, every one of these that we approve contributes to that problem that, yes, is a state problem to solve, but we have a real problem supplying the energy and doing all of these things. So we've got to advocate up and down, local to state, to kind of try to get our hands around this.
And from attending some of your meetings, you're very careful to say that the group is not against all data centers. You just believe in doing it the right way and doing it in the right places. If I summarize
I think
that
that's
right.
exactly it. We are not anti-data center. I mean, the reality is they are a backbone of our digital infrastructure. They are necessary. They are happening. And I think, broadly speaking, I see a lot of conversation where people will say, I'm pro or I'm anti, but you'll forgive me and permit me to say that it often isn't backed up by a really educated opinion on why they're that way. It's just a soundbite. And then that starves us from being able to really engage around what application we should approve and why, and what application we should say no to and why. And in a county where we're facing an enormous amount of rezone requests, we really want to get into the applications themselves and be able to read them and advocate that, yeah, this one, and we recently advocated for one that we thought was a good example of one that we could say, yes, this is one, if we're going to do this, that we can do and we should say yes to. And we offered that position. There are ones where we cannot say that and we won't be saying that. So in the end, we hope that helps us get where we should go, and ultimately find each other on the other side of this.
And I think that at least from the some of the community writ large who aren't in the weeds on this, or in the I can't think of a joke,
That's okay.
an area on this, but the perception by some people is that the group is against all of them. But every time I've had any interactions or I've gone
No.
to the meetings, it's not that, and that's why I wanted to bring it up.
No, thanks.
Because
Yeah.
I always love to dispel misconceptions, because if the misconception is out there, then they're not listening to all the other nuances of the discussion. The interesting elements that have risen, and you've said how this is how it morphed or changed over the years. When I was on the board and we were starting it, there were certain things, and now there's new things that are out there that we didn't have. And the energy one is part of it, of having little generators on the site.
Well, they're not really little.
No,
They're
that's what I mean.
the size of tractor trailers, but do continue.
Right, but so, but it's not the full-fledged. It's not a nuclear power plant on the site, but that weren't even mentioned 5-6 years ago.
Sure.
Now that's like, no, we need to be doing things like that. So you're right. A lot of things have come up, in part because the industry has changed and has learned from its own mistakes or its own growth.
Yeah, well, and speaking of the water, that's one of the concerns longitudinally that we harbor, is that things are being done, experiments are being done to move away from even water as your means of cooling. So when you look at investing massively in water infrastructure to provide, whether it's reclaimed water or potable or otherwise, well, what happens when that's no longer what's necessary? So there are obsolescence concerns that are mapped over all of this for what do we get when the market is disrupted, changes, does whatever it will, and how have we gone out over our skis in ways that ultimately don't serve us? And so those are all the things that we want to think about and talk about before we just sort of fling ourselves off the cliff in an I don't know, I don't mean to say uninterrogated, but we talk about how too much of a good thing is not a good thing, and we want a diversification, and we want to poco a poco, we say, like to go slowly, learning, course correcting, and just to do this right.
Right, and we hope the county and any government does that, and
Of
sort of
course.
like takes that mentality. And even the companies. I remember when we did a tour of one of the ones up in Loudon, I think it was.
I've never gotten to
Um,
do a tour. I guess I've got to run
oh
for office to do a tour.
no, no.
I don't know anybody who's toured one who
Really?
who
Oh,
isn't
wow.
running or elected.
Oh, or just say you're running.
Yeah.
So but the initial buildings that they constructed, it was Prince William, and they showed us some of the older ones and the newer ones.
Yeah.
And the newer ones are built so that when the technology changes, they can they can retrofit the building
Yeah.
to fit the new technology, whereas the other ones were built for just that technology.
Mhm.
So, as you said, with things changing, it's just logical to sort of build or think ahead and not just put all your eggs in one basket
Yeah.
type thing, which is nice on that aspect. So we've talked about anything in particular about the building height issue.
I mean, I think the building height issue is like, forgive me for saying that everything is contextual and situational. It depends on its neighbors, and that is where, again, setbacks and buffers can be helpful. But I mean, simply put, the taller the building and the closer it is, the reality is that, generally speaking, right, a house can't be more, the average building is not going to be more than 35 feet in Stafford. So when you're talking about a 105-foot data center building that's, let's say, 700 feet long, and you're putting that next to a 1 or 2 story house, well, we can see right away how from a visual impact standpoint, that's huge. And then when we start to think about things like low frequency noise, right, which for the audience is obviously there's audible noise, but there's also a different register of noise with data centers that is felt, not heard, kind of like a truck idling in the distance that feels, it causes a lot of biological changes in cellular tissue, but it also just is an unsettling thing that can lead to insomnia, and it's hugely distracting. Well, the taller the building, the farther those sound waves are going to carry. So those are some of the concerns around height that we want to think about, how, like anything, how they live in relationship to other things. So what are the human and non-human life and quality of life implications when we do this? And again, that's why we've got to be able to talk about individual applications, not just die on our hills of yes, always and everywhere, or no, never, which doesn't actually allow us to enter the theater and do the work.
Right. And it's sort of, and I'll sort of semi go on a soapbox on this one. If you go to the site that's on Eskimo Hill Road,
Sure.
where they clear cutted everything,
Yep.
which many of us were very adamant that you not do that. Not you, but that the company not
It's
do
okay.
that.
I was also.
And then when you drive down the road and see that they did, logic would say that the trees that are there, which tend to be taller and old growth
Mhm.
and thicker, and have longer root structures, would A, help with the sound issue because they're taller naturally, and B, help with the water runoff and drainage and all that stuff because they already have a root structure. And when you clear cut, then you replace it with, we promise to replace it with something of the same, but it's not going to be the same height. It's not going to have the same root structure. And so it's, yeah.
But yes to all of that, and then let me add, I think one of the particular challenges of low frequency noise, and part of why you're seeing municipalities try to circle in on this, is that low frequency noise will travel through trees, through walls. So sound to deal with the sound impacts for low frequency noise is its own animal, and because they're 24/7, we just can't handle it the same as a neighbor who decided to do a project on a Sunday morning at 7 a.m. or a teenager who's blasting, their Chapel Roan too loud at 2 a.m. It's not this punctiliar moment we've got to solve. It's this endless, ongoing thing. And one of our members is a bioacoustician by trade. And so she did a sound study down at her property in George Washington District. And what she was able to learn through that process was that a data center would eradicate the ability for her sound levels to ever go back to what they ever were prior to its presence, even with even while meeting the standards. And so what that means for people is that it's like being in a room on a weekend night in the quiet in your house versus being in a bar. I mean, the scale of change is like, who wants to live in a bar? Who wants to live in a noisy Starbucks 24/7? But that's what we're dealing with when we're talking about really trying to get noise standards and sound attenuation in between the lines so that people aren't miserable in the name of this happening.
The way always has that wonderful, I'll say wonderful, but with a great deal of sarcasm, debate where people are doing businesses, other types of businesses, and would say the same thing. Well, we did a sound study over 24 hours. We're like, yeah, but your business is closed at 8 of those 24.
Yeah.
So that study is meaningless. And same with traffic studies. It's like, so that's always one of the things where there's a question of, I'm not going to say 6, 7 with my hands doing that. So we had the recent meeting and public hearing. There was a joint public hearing where the new standards were, and your group were instrumental in getting a good turnout for that, even if the public hearing part didn't start till 10:55.
I believe the first comment started at 10:54, and that individual signed up to speak at 4:15 p.m.
Yeah. So how were you able to get so many people to be willing to come at 4:15, 5:15, 6:15, 7:15? So I won't keep going.
I wish I could tell you, or I promise I'm not being genteel by dodging taking the credit. People are intrinsically motivated. I think I could do all the same things that we've done to get a group galvanized around caterpillars. And I don't think people are going to stay until 2:30 in the morning to make a public comment on that. So of course, I'm so proud of the work, and I'm simply sitting here being a representative of a group of just incredible, incredible people who make up what Stafford County is. But I really do think it's because this issue matters to people that much. They are profoundly invested. And so people are researching and reading and emailing and making calls and going down rabbit holes in the middle of the day at 2 a.m. and showing up to meetings like this because they're that invested, because this matters. And that's inherent to the issue. That's not us.
Well, and what's really nice in my neighborhood, there's a parcel of land that's for sale. That the people had it for a long time. Initially, they were going to make homes. Person dies, person buys it, gets the land. They start marking it and trying to figure out what to do, and everybody is thinking it's going to be data centers.
Yeah.
But that got them interested and motivated about a topic in general, because then I was able to explain to them, well, way back in the day, there was talk of connecting the road here, and like, oh, I never knew that was on the books. I'm like, well, initially, the people who owned it, that's what they were thinking, and so, or the county was thinking of, doing this, that, and the other. So it is nice that even if it's not the specific project of a data center, you're getting people involved in the process, involved in learning about their community and the way things work, and that is really, as somebody who's been in in the county and seen fewer people show up at public hearings for things that matter, it is really impressive to see people that engaged in that and coming up and sort of understanding the system before they get up there.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, that is. And again, that's just the whole group understanding we all know this, right? That education is power. So if the public can understand not just the issue, but how to engage meaningfully around the issue, then that can be a really helpful way for people to speak really in ways that serve the public interest. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're not telling people what to think or what to say, but we are helping them know where to look, how to understand where things live. And like you said, the way that these things are intersected. So you may not live right next to an application right now, but for a multitude of reasons, this issue might matter to you. And certainly that's been our experience, is that by no means is everybody who comes out and speaks or reaches out to us living in a property that's abutting a data center development. They have a whole host of concerns around us doing this right and well that has motivated people who don't live anywhere near one and probably won't in some cases.
And then I've noticed, and later on we'll probably put your we usually do this, put your website
Sure.
on the Facebook page, and then if you want to yell it out. But
ProtectStafford.com.
okay, and what I've found is when I go to there, if I want to get more information, there's links of where I can go to get it.
Yeah, there's info on our website. There's also an email listserv you can subscribe to there, and then we're on Facebook as well. So
and what's really nice is, say for example, that I'm thinking they're going to do X. If they put a data center, it will be X. That's how they're going to get their water. Well, then your site will sit there and have the information. Okay, for these type of things, this is what they would do, and this is where to go to get information on it. It's not everybody's like a cookie cutter of it.
No, of course not. And yeah, so that's yes, thank you.
And that's really good, because then that helps dispel misinformation or disinformation, because it's like, oh wow, if my neighbor tells me X, and then I go to your site and it's like, well, if you want information, here's where you can go to get the information. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we try to link only to things that are. I mean, look, I'm sure that I've made mistakes. I'm sure I will continue to make mistakes. The goal is to be open to being corrected, clarify it, and move on. No one's trying to continue to keep the public confused. I don't think. I mean, there's a ton of that happens where, goodness, somebody wrote me the other day and said, this was actually yesterday, is the board meeting tonight? So this was a Tuesday night when the board did not meet. And are they talking about the data center in George Washington? Well, I mean, you and I both know there. I wish there was the data center. There's multiple. So I had to write them back, and I haven't heard back yet, no, they're not meeting, and which one, but helping people understand. And I did. I shared with her here, and we have it linked on our website. Here is the county website where you can see all of the upcoming meetings. You can read their agenda, so that we don't need to be the gatekeeper between that information and people. We just need them to understand where to go to get it, how they can really meaningfully put their oar in the water of this conversation, I suppose.
Right. And that's awesome. Because there's too many times in life, there's entities or whatever that aren't trying to give information. They're trying to spin. We won't talk about anything nationally right now.
Well, and I'll cop to the fact that we're not without opinion or willing to have opinion on these applications. That's like I said already, we supported the Cranes Corner rezoning. There will be applications that we can and do and want to support, and there will be applications that we don't, and we'll be clear about that.
Are there any things in the future that you think the group will address besides the data center issue, or is this one so large?
I think that's the truth, is that I really do think it's important for anybody, individual or group, to know what you can rightly handle. And the data center issue right now it's really very big. We're looking at a very busy, I anticipate Q1 and Q2 of 2026. We all know that how many more applications will come forward is a giant question mark. There's at least 2 that I'm anticipating seeing imminently here. And so I think we're going to have our hands really genuinely pretty full. That doesn't mean, obviously, that people who are engaged with the county rarely, put on blinders around everything else. So sure, you'll see us in our individual capacities speaking on other things. I mean, I want to see, I'll just cop to it, like for the Kraken line, I hope that the public is aware of that, not necessarily to do anything more than be aware. And for people who are going to have infrastructure that they can't see, that they're going to see, I want them to be able to advocate, to talk with Dominion around what works or doesn't work. But I don't know that Protect Stafford is going to try to take that up or make definitive position statements so much as, again, make sure that the public is aware of all of these things, aware of how they intersect, and how can we talk about doing that the best way possible if it's going to happen.
And we don't have to get in the weeds on this. You and I talked, I think, yesterday on this, but we're heading into the budget season as well. And part of the whole discussion about the data centers has been the amount of revenue they'll bring. But at a work session last week, there was sort of confusion, I'll put, because I got confused. So I'll say I was confused about when it all will start coming through, and the rezonings versus the buy rights and this, that, and the other. And it just, that whole element, which if we're dorks like us and watching work sessions, they wouldn't know what's going on,
Yeah.
and there's a whole bunch of elements there that just that's why I said it's sort of the ebb and flow to this that well, either we don't know or we may not know or the public may not know because you know
Yeah,
there
but
used to happen things happening at an official meeting or a public hearing, and this
Yeah.
isn't either.
But I think I'd like to push us to model that tax info for a couple of reasons, and you can stop me if I go. It's unfortunate that the money doesn't get more attention, I think, from the public. Maybe I think I understand it. It is complicated, right? And data center revenue, but it's not, right? The county has been very clear that, I mean, we have it in the comp plan amendment, and this is per Magnum Economics, even with all the volatility that in its aggregation, it levels off at $18.5 million per million square foot of data center. So and the data center projects themselves do produce fiscal impacts by year in their applications. So it is reasonable and very possible to model tax revenue into the 5-year forecast. We haven't done it. I don't understand why, because the 5 that we've said yes to are $175.75 million, which is 38.6% of the general fund. If you only just did the real estate revenue, that Majowski has presented to the second decimal point what that math is. And so anyway, the point is to say, this has maybe been messy, but to say that the numbers are quite clear. Admittedly, the C&P is volatile, but again, he's presented tables that show how to wrangle that and make a conservative estimate that you can run with, and to neglect to account for any of that money, which we know those buildings in year 3 and 4 and 5 are going to be online and operating. To just not touch it at all when the whole reason we're doing this is for the tax revenue, for me, that's something I want to push to see done. I think it's only reasonable and responsible, honestly.
And several of the supervisors did push.
Yeah.
That night.
It's insane that you would say, well, we don't quite know and it's volatile, which we all know, so we're just not going to model it at all.
Right. And so to their credit and Scott's credit, there's a lot of pushback of trying to get that information out there. But that's something that what I'm saying is we don't know, and unless you're really one of the dorks like us, you may not hear it. And
Yeah.
so
well, and I'd really like to see, and I wonder why, and I don't mean to suggest anything untoward, but why I'm not sure why Mr. Majowski wasn't at that work session, right? The person who's been doing all of this modeling wasn't there. I would really like to see into the future that he and the CFO are having conversations to figure out how to do that modeling to get that into the budget. And we can all, as we always do when we're talking about fiscal projections, we have to hold some things in trust and in abeyance around how it'll shake out. But to do nothing is, I think, a bridge too far in the opposite direction.
right. So anything in the future that you foresee or that you'd like to touch on before we wrap up?
For Protect Stafford,
Yep.
just, be in touch with us, ask us questions. I've said this many times, I think, at this point, that I am so enjoying the opportunity to learn more about the county, meet people. It's where we have is worth fighting for and worth protecting. So I would just encourage people, learn more, get involved. Don't be afraid to come to a public meeting and speak. Stafford's worth fighting for.
And and check out your website and check out on
check
Facebook,
out you can check us out on Facebook or our website.
because you have periodic meetings at different ends of the county.
We do. We do have monthly meetings, and we will. We don't have a date yet, but I do anticipate that we'll have an upcoming public information meeting that we'll publicize soon. So if what this does is compels you to want to learn more, something that we've done in 3 districts, and again, we'll do another one relatively soon, is just create space to do a little presentation where we do some data center education, both writ large and also as it pertains to the county, and then open the floor up to something more like this where residents can ask questions. We can go back and forth and really help situate you to the lay of the land. So keep your eyes peeled for an announcement for one of those to be on the calendar soon.
Right, and I've attended 2 of them, and they're very informative. And much of what I've said today is what I've heard there. I mean,
Well, thank
about
you.
what your group's goal is, and and et cetera, and the education element of it. As I said, I was just very impressed. Went to one, and the next one, I didn't know I was going to your meeting. But somebody said, "Oh my gosh, there's a possible one in my neighborhood." And she told me to go, and I went. And I was like, "Oh yeah," um, and I mean, and there's really a strong effort on your part, and to make sure that one person doesn't dominate, and that you really make an effort to like get everybody to be able to feel comfortable to make an opinion or ask a question.
Oh,
Or
thank you.
so that from that standpoint, as an educator, I like that. I mean, just as
Well,
a
I think the room, we can get into sort of teaching practices, but I think when the room can dialogue, it's better for everyone, because then that allows us to really answer the questions that are in the room versus presume what the room wants to know. And often people in the room have really great information to share that's worth coming out. So it just creates more of a round model for learning. And I think something we haven't talked about, but that is really important to me, is the civility piece. This is a contentious issue in some cases and places for people, because the stakes are so high, right? For people with environmental commitments, for people who are living next to these, the stakes are really life or death. It feels, rightly so, to think about living for 15 years next to a no holds barred construction site, to then survive that, to then have the other side of that. It's scary. And nevertheless, while we talk about this, to do the good work of presuming positive intent, of speaking civilly, of really doing that work of being kind and dialoguing across difference, that's really important to us as an organization, important as the public comes online. There is no utility to coming and throwing stones and presuming that the BOS and the Planning Commission are all just jerks. That does not help at all. And I don't think it's true. So giving each other a lot of mutual respect is just a really core value of ours.
That's awesome. And usually we end the program with the guests saying if there's anything, a story about Stafford or anything particular that they'd like to end on a happy note. You just ended on a really happy note. So is there anything in particular that comes to mind? If not, you can just sort of.
Oh, no, of course I can think of a lovely. I have sort of two thoughts. So may I have two? If I
You
keep
may
it
have two,
succinct?
because our
Okay.
guest last month didn't have one. So
Give one
you're
for
having
them.
his, yes.
Okay. The first one is, like, one of my favorite things to do is ride horseback. And anybody who's ridden horseback or walked our trails or out in the woods, I think that the rural character that we have is really something special. And so I hope you have an opportunity to get a friend with a horse and go ride and look up at the night sky or get in the woods. That's beautiful. But for me, actually, what comes to mind, do you remember that Snowmageddon that we had a few years
Oh,
ago, where we
yes.
got like 18 inches in 90 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
So where I live, it's a more rural part of North Stafford, and we were snowed in like you wouldn't believe. And I remember one of my neighbors came by with a corncob pipe, and I said, "How's it look out there, Dave?" And he said, "Like Armageddon." And I thought, well, that sounds a little hyperbolic. And then when I went out there, indeed it was. It was insane, the amount. It just looked like woods and forest. You couldn't tell it was a road for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew that we would be like very, very low priority for Dominion and VDOT to get to us, just because we're distal. And so as a group of neighbors, we banded together and we fought our way out. We chained and dragged, and kids dragged. And it got my neighbors and me in conversation and relationship in a way that was incredible. And when I look back on those pictures, or I guess when I reflect in this moment, I don't know what we would have done, but together, like we cleared this massive amount of land and made it traversable. And when VDOT finally came, they said, "Y'all did that?" And we said, "Yes, we did." And so that's my really special memory of how that group of people came into relationship around an issue. And maybe I hope it foretells something.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is nice when the community comes together, and our neighborhood was the same. We're not that rural, but we are like 20 homes
Mm-hmm.
on one grid, and
Yeah,
so
I mean,
we
that's
were the
basically
last.
us.
But it was nice. People, if they got their power on, they were giving people their space heaters. And
That's exactly it.
it's
People
just,
were bringing out cookies to feed
yes.
each other. And so we knew each other and know each other now on the other side of that differently.
Yeah.
And so the web of relationships that Stafford has given and continues to give me is just such a rich gift that I really am so grateful to be here and be in this place. And I hope that we all just want nothing more than to give it to our children and children's children in good stead.
Well, we're grateful that you came here today and you're giving not only us the information, but it will help our children and further children after that. So thank you very much, Erin, for being on the show.
Thank you.
And we'll be in touch with you often and as we move forward.
Yeah, may it be.
Again, thanks to Erin and the members of Protect Stafford for taking such a keen interest in improving our quality of life in the county. And that looks like it ought to do it for this episode of Stafford Connect. I want to thank you for joining us on this episode, and we do appreciate you and hope you will refer us to all your friends. And while we are talking about friends, we want to thank our friends at Tilly's Ice Cream for the continued support of this program. Tilly's is located at the Ferry Farm Shopping Center at 215 Kings Highway. Fall and winter hours for the shop are Wednesday and Thursday 2 to 8, Saturday 2 to 9, and Sunday 2 to 8. So the next time you're in the area, stop in and treat yourself. You'll be glad you did. And on our next episode, we'll be talking to newly elected members of the Board of Supervisors and the school board as they are taking over these new positions. From the Board of Supervisors, we will have Maya Guy, and for the school board, Shannon Fingerholtz. And we would like to get their ideas as they are moving into these new positions. Until then, I'm Tom Cohen, and you're listening to the Stafford Connect podcast. Stafford Connect is a River's Edge Media original podcast. You can listen to the show anywhere you get your podcast or catch the video on our YouTube channel. Stafford Connect. The conversation begins here.